friends, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 466, and my guest is Wendy B. Correa. She's the author of the best-selling memoir, My Pretty Baby. It chronicles her journey from childhood trauma through spiritual practices, music industry encounters, and sobriety. She's a former radio personality and was Hunter S. Thompson's personal assistant. I really enjoyed talking with her. She is a kindred, and her book is an easy read. It's a ride and a half. Just her experiences are all over the place, and some are quite sad and some are hilarious. Definitely one of those books you pick up and you don't put down till it's done. It's very exciting that since I interviewed her, her book reached the best-selling list. It had only just come out when I spoke with her, so that was very cool too. Congratulations to Wendy. And in other news, I saw a movie last night that I thought was probably the best film I've seen in a really, really, really long time. It's the Jordanian submission for the Oscars this year. It's called All That's Left of You. It's an absolutely stunning film. So if it's coming to your town, go see it in the theater. It is worthy of a theater and not just looking at it on the phone. Really incredible, incredible film. My God. Oof, devastating and beautiful and haunting and sobering. Just incredible. In other news, check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests and the show. Check out Susan Ruthism if you want to find me on social media, susanruth.com if you want to go straight to my website. My music is on pretty much all the musical platforms. And rate and review and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast. And thank you for listening. And be well, stay safe, be love. Here we go. Wendy Correa, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you so much. It's fabulous to be here.
Firstly, I read your book,
which is amazing. Thank you.
It is a wild ride.
It is a wild ride. That's how I describe it.
I was thinking about this last night. I thought, okay, I read a lot. And I was thinking, what would I say when I recommended this book? And really, I came up with, it's got something for everyone. It's got rock and roll. It's got not just rock and roll, but legendary musicians of the time period. It's got the childhood trauma, which I think a lot of people want to read about because it's so prevalent. It's got not just therapy, but so many different modalities of therapy, which is also interesting. And then perseverance. And the thing, which we will get to through the process of this conversation, but it's got hope core. It's got, there's hope at the end. And also for me as a child who was raised by one of my parents is mentally ill. And so growing up in that kind of house, very difficult. And so for me, seeing that you did an incredible job of not passing on that energy to the next generation, I was like, yes. I was very happy.
That was my goal. Goal. I'm going to be the cycle breaker, and my kid is going to have a wholesome, loving, stable, art and creativity filled home and get everything that I did not get.
And I there's no spoilers. I don't want to. The tricky part about interviewing an author when you've read the book is that you don't. I'm going to let you sort of lead by the questions I ask, which sounds counterintuitive, but I don't want to give away spoilers because part of the fun of uncovering a book is that, So that being said, let's go back to the beginning. Where were you raised and how did your childhood shape you?
I was raised in Illinois, and right off the bat, I would say that the first trauma was my father dying when I was 7 years old. And back then, there was not a lot of information about how to talk to children about death, especially the death of a parent. And no one really explained to me anything. So it was awful because I just had so many questions and I was filled with fear that my mother would also die. And so that was the first trauma, is just sort of not understanding what was happening, being filled with fear, and not knowing how to process my grief, my sadness, my loss. And then a few years later, when the man who would become my stepdad came onto the picture, he was, he had mental illness, I would say borderline alcoholism, and had violent rages and intermittent violence. And so, of course, that created me learning how to walk on eggshells, how to read a room at a very young age, how to hold my breath, how to try to be invisible, and still trying to take care of my mother because I was terrified that she would leave or die or that, my stepdad would hurt her. That was pretty much the intense wounding, but also I, from a very young age, realized that I wasn't really getting the love from my older siblings either. And at first I always would say, well, it's because they're 7 and 12 years older than me. There's this huge age difference. And I thought that it had something to do with that. But in my family, even though my mother could be neglectful by, subjecting me to my stepdad's violence, she was very loving to me. And I felt she was the only person who loved me in my family. So there was that deep bonding and fear that she would die or go away. So that is the Genesis story. I left home at 17 and moved to California on my own by myself and got myself into college and went to Diablo Valley College in the East Bay in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then I transferred to Humboldt State, which is where my healing started, where I started to seek out healing for my life and for my trauma that I was just intuitively drawn to. And as I started to go to college, I was like, a dry sponge, just wanted to learn everything. And I just piled on the courses and wanted to take every class and learn everything. And that's really when my healing began.
I'm a youngest child. And as I was reading it, I was thinking, man, she had the experience of a youngest child because regardless, I feel of the family dynamic, there is a weird kind of freedom with the youngest because especially when there's a big age gap, as there is in my family. My 2 older brothers are way older than I. And I think, and I'm going to make a joke of it, but it's the parents by then are like, do whatever you want. So yes, there's a neglect that is an underling to it, but it's also this weird freedom that you can do all the things. And again, no spoilers, but reading about your younger life, you were left a lot to your own devices. Part of that, I'm guessing, was self-preservation on your part. For your mother's, with your mother's point of view, were you ever able to say, I know that she was aware that there was violence, obviously. I mean, she saw it. So why do you think it was that she would be drawn into a relationship like that after the fact when your dad was so loving and kind? And B, do you think that she just had a faith that you were able to handle being a feral child? I called myself a feral child. And you bring up ACE in the book, and I too have taken ACE, and I'm like, oh my God, I should be a serial killer. But
Exactly.
but that almost the fact that we were feral probably saved us because it kept, there was so much going on that we were getting into, good or bad, whatever. That's a judgment call.
As you may have gathered, I don't really know what my mother's relationship was to my dad, who died when I was 7. My siblings seem to think that he loved her, but she didn't love him. And as you will learn near the
Yes,
end of
no
the book,
spoilers. It's
there's
got
some spoiler there about
it's a twist.
so my siblings said that he wasn't such a great guy. There were things that, of course, as a 7-year-old child, I wasn't aware of, or, I never saw him doing anything, because I was just a little kid when he died. But also, you might remember that my mother also was subjected to child sexual assault. And so I believe that that really affected her, of course, her whole life. She never had the benefit of therapy or even telling anyone until her 70s when she told me. So I believe that that affected her choices in men. And, with my stepfather, as you also know, he could be charming and wonderful, and he loved her dearly. There's no doubt that they, loved each other. They were so adoring of each other. And I feel like my mother felt that maybe she could save him, maybe she could help him, as many women, not just women, but many partners in relationships feel that they can fix or they can help or they can save their partner, who either has addiction or mental health issues. And so going back to your feral, I think in some ways my mother didn't really, she never had, she came out of the depression, and they never had money. So she didn't really know how to give me things that, I gave my son, after school programs and summer camps and, acting lessons and guitar lessons. And she didn't drive. She was very dependent on my stepdad for driving her around. And I started driving her around when I was 13, just to take her to get her hair done and go to the grocery store.
Well, you were starting to drive at 11. Was that right?
Yes, I started to drive at 11 when we were going cross country, like on vacations. He was teaching me how to drive at 11, but I was full on, driving and, taking her to the grocery store when I was 13. And finally, when I was leaving home, I convinced her, almost 60 years old, to get her driver's license. But going back to being a feral child too, I think my mother was preoccupied with my stepdad, and she was also working and, just had her hands full. But she also didn't, she just, I don't think, knew how to guide me because no one had guided her.
There's also a thing about that generation where they did marry and have children because that's what that generation did. And there was not the option. There was not the idea that, oh, maybe I don't have to do this.
Right.
In conversations with my own mother, and say, would you have done it if you could do it all over again? You'd think they would say, oh, yeah, I would definitely have you kids. But it took a second. She said, no, I wouldn't have gotten
Oh,
married or
really?
had kids. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I didn't take it personally. I was like, yeah, that tracks. I would have taken it personally at 20 or at 10, but not now,
Not now. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a line in it that I wrote down, an unspoken message that some secrets we keep to ourselves. And of the whole of the book, there are some really powerful moments. And I have to say, just a trigger warning for those of us who did suffer in our childhoods. There's times it's hard to turn the page because you're like, oh shit, what's about to happen? And that PTSD, I'm right there with you. I'm like, I've been in that body. I know what that feels like. And so trying to get through a book like that can be daunting sometimes, but it's certainly worthwhile. But that line in particular stuck out because it is, when you grow up in houses like that, and that was you were being warned about a neighborhood dad, but that line itself to me stands out so much because we do, as children, do everything we can to protect our abusers.
Yes. And I'm glad that you felt zipped up in my body and you were right there with me, but I'm also sorry. You were zipped up right in my body and you were right there, and that's a good thing. And I'm sorry. As my mom would always say to me when she finally revealed to me her own childhood sexual assault, and I would try to get her to talk about it, Mom, you've never, talked to anyone. Do you want to talk about this? Oh, no. And Wendy, we didn't have Oprah when I was coming up, and it was true. Like, I have a lot of compassion and empathy for both of my parents, as you read. Like, it is not just black and white. I'm not vilifying really anyone. I hope I don't. And as I say in my author's note, I'm not, trying to make anybody to be out to be an asshole. It is the circumstances, it is the time, it is the society that, my mom repressed what happened to her. And, we don't talk about bad things, we just keep on keeping on. And with my stepdad, I spell out his intergenerational trauma. I dug even further into his trauma, which I don't outline in the book, but it makes sense. I wanted to make sense of where this intergenerational trauma started with. And it doesn't excuse people's bad behaviors, it just explains it. And so, like you said, you and I, we should be serial killers with, I have an ACE score of 7 out of 10. And so I don't know what it is that makes some people just determined to live their best life and to heal and to, be a cycle breaker and to move on from what happened to them as children. But I had some deep, deep instinct that I had to heal myself, that I had to save myself, that I had to find a way to take care of myself so that I deserved to have a good life. And I don't know, why some people that would just, it could have easily gone south. I could have easily died with drinking and doing drugs and the things that I did and the risks that I took. I could easily have already died by now, but I had a strong survival instinct. And now that's why I wrote My Pretty Baby. Is I hope that it'll be a survival guide for someone else who may not even know where to start with their healing. And that's why I sort of outlined my journey and all of the modalities that I did and how I just kept seeking, and I just kept, trying to use this modality to heal and that modality to heal. And then I had some fun adventures along the way, especially in the music industry. So I hope it's enlightening to people, and I hope that it makes someone else feel less alone in their own story. And so that's my deepest goal.
Yeah. When you start talking about some of your romances and find yourself in some similar scenarios, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but you're lamenting, like, why am I drawing these people to me? Is it just like how I grew up? And I thought to myself, the truth of the matter is you don't even necessarily have to draw those types of people to you. I think that is part of what happens. I think we do that as we're trying to figure out how to break cycles. But also, I think a great many people have these issues. And so you're kind of,
so chances are
you're gonna meet somebody that's got that stuff. The trick, I think, is that as you heal is to recognize it faster and get out. Whereas
that's right.
Before we're healed, we stay in because we think we had to fix that person like we had to fix our parent.
That's right.
Yeah. And so it isn't that there's not some magical unicorn person, although Nacho seems like a magical unicorn person. But,
I'm going to tell him you said that.
As does his family. That's such a blessing. It's like it's such a blessing. No spoilers, but yes. Love it.
Well, and if you'll remember in my book, in Aspen, before I met Nacho, as
Yes.
I was thinking about it. I said, the saying in Aspen at the time about dating was that the odds are good,
If the
but the
goods are on.
goods are on. So you never quite know what you're going to get. But yes, and going back to that, I mean, every therapist would tell you that oftentimes people sort of repeat what happened in their home from their homes growing up, the parents that they had, they'll repeat that in relationships because number one, that's what's comfortable.
Mm.
But then also there's this underlying, well, maybe if I can fix them, I get a do-over. Maybe I can't fix my family, but maybe I can fix them. Or they will love me so much that they will change. So we do give ourselves those messages. And as I also say in the book about forgiveness and forgiving ourselves for staying perhaps too long in relationships that were not so good for us, we have to forgive ourselves for that as well.
Yeah, forgiveness is tricky. And I think you make a good point that it has nothing to do with the person that is inflicting the pain and everything to do with the person who has the pain inflicted upon them.
Yes,
You can forgive someone who will never give a shit whether or not you've forgiven them or give a shit about you. That's a,
exactly.
yeah, wrapping your head
Yes.
around that is actually a freedom. It sounds terrible, but it's a freedom.
Well, the work of the Buddhist psychologist Jack Kornfield and the 12-step programs and all of the literature that I've read over the years and specifically, on forgiveness made so much sense to me. Of course, we're given the message like, oh, but it's your family and, family comes first and blood is thicker than water and so on and so forth. We're actually like guilted about not forgiving. And so when I read, oh, I can forgive them, but that doesn't mean I want to have lunch with them. I can forgive them to release the burden that is on me or the anger that I'm holding on to. And I talk about what the Buddha said, that being angry at someone is like holding a hot coal in your hand and then thinking you're going to throw it at someone. Well, it's actually burning you. And so forgiveness is for you to let go of that burden. But again, you're not condoning what they did and you aren't necessarily reconciling. And the other thing that I say is that every person has the right on your own terms, on your own time to forgive. And for some people, if you don't want to forgive, that's okay too, because there may actually be some things that are unforgivable. And so I don't, people should not be forced to forgive anyone.
Oh my gosh, no, absolutely not. Everyone is on their own path, certainly. And also, the thing about forgiveness I've found in my own life is that it's not 100% every day. It ebbs and flows depending. Like, you can forgive someone, but then if they're still continuing to behave a certain way, or if the family dynamic, which is my family dynamic, is such that it still supports the abuser even in their old age by not stepping in to protect the one that gets abused, then
Mhm.
forgiveness ebbs and flows. It's a living, breathing thing as well. In my opinion, in my life.
Of course, it isn't static and it isn't one size fits all, and it isn't forgive and forget and it's all done. And like I say in my pretty baby too, is that you think you may have forgiven, but then something triggers like another layer of the onion and more, grief or sadness or something bubbles to the top, and you may find yourself wanting to forgive again or forgive deeper or as you process your own trauma. For me, thankfully, there's no one in my family that I still am subjected to. And so it is really easy to forgive the dead because, you don't have to worry about that anymore. And I am estranged from one sibling. And so, I don't have to deal with that. In the back of my book, I have a whole lot of resources. Eamon Dolan just released a book about estrangement, and I love what he says that, no, we need to hold family members accountable just like friends. And it's so strange to me. If you have a friend who's really abusive to you, you would just not be friends with that person anymore. But if it's a family member, then it's called estrangement. I mean, we don't call it estrangement when you walk away from a friend who is not good to you. Life is too short. I believe you have to surround yourself with people who lift you up, who reflect back to you your goodness and your self-worth. And we just need to be surrounded by people who are good, who bring out the best in us, who want the best for us. And so, unfortunately, for people who are still engaged with a family member, I would just say the thing that you need to do is to put strong boundaries and, let them know what your boundaries are. No, no, you do not get to call me names or whatever the situation is. And I will no longer have this conversation with you, or now I'm leaving. And, you come up with what you need to do to set those boundaries and what you're going to say and stick to it and let people know that you will not tolerate their abuse.
Yeah. And it is tricky because I think growing up, it's 80% abuse, 20% good. And then as you get older and now in relative old age, it's more like 80% good, 20% abuse. But yes, getting up and leaving the room, saying, you don't get to talk to me like that, or whatever it is, that's very empowering. And I came upon an idea long ago through various, I like to call it woo-woo, my woo-woo inclinations as a young person, that, oh, we are individual souls. And therefore, I may have chosen to come into this family, but they're individual souls as well. And that gave me an ability to detach a little better, knowing that they were their own free-floating soul. I'm my own free-floating soul. That those were just the people that were the conduit to bring me to the planet.
Right.
And so that makes it, for me, that worked for me to have a bit of a separation,
Yeah, I mean, and nowadays, we are starting to release the shackles of, blood is thicker than water, and people are learning that there's all kinds of families. We don't necessarily have to be just a family with the people that we share blood with. We can have a chosen family. We can adopt people and we can draw those people to us. I have quite an extensive chosen family that, treats me great. And that's all we can do is be around other people and to show the people who are that for us how much we love them and appreciate them and we're grateful for them in our lives. So chosen family is pretty powerful as well. I mean, adopting a child, for instance, that's your child, period, because you say so. You've adopted them. You don't have to share blood in order for them to be family.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. Let's get into some of the fun stuff, the rock and roll
Yay!
years.
Okay.
Let's talk about that a little bit. You have met some of my idols and hung out with some of my idols. When I saw Joni Mitchell on the page, I about lost my mind.
Oh, yay.
And Robin Williams as well. I cried so hard when he died. Let's talk about that experience for you that took over your life for a while.
We could start with Peace Sunday in 1982 at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. I had been doing civil disobedience and working towards a bilateral nuclear weapons freeze initiative that was on the California ballot, and I helped to get that passed. After I had done the civil disobedience, they asked me if I would do security at this big concert that they were having, and it was called Peace Sunday. And, could I do security? And was like, yes. And so when I got to the arena, to the Rose Bowl, And the woman in charge was going through her papers and she said, okay, so you're going to be in charge of Jackson Browne's little sister, Gracie. I about lost my mind because, that's who I was going to marry when I was a kid, dreaming and drooling over his albums, And so it was an amazing event. It's historical. Anybody can Google Peace Sunday 1982, but it was, as I said, Jackson Browne, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Stevie Wonder, Bonnie Raitt,
Dylan,
Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Jesse Colin Young, Dan Fogelberg, Stevie Nicks, Linda Ronstadt, Tom Petty. It was amazing, including all of the celebrities like Bette Midler. It just went on and on and on. And so once Grace, I had to watch Gracie, but then once she decided she was tired, she was just a adolescent. She wanted to go home, so I got a driver to take her home. Then I was free to just hang out backstage. And I was standing there when this woman said to me, wow, this is pretty cool, isn't it? And it turned out to be Margot Kidder, who played Lois Lane opposite, Christopher Reeve in Superman. And it was just about near the end, and they were putting all the microphones up on the stage in front of 100,000 people at the Rose Bowl. Margot was supposed to go up, everybody that participated, all of the musicians were going up to sing Teach Your Children. So Margot wouldn't go up to the microphone. I kept saying, Margot, go. You're supposed to go up to the microphone. And she's like, I'm not going. I'm scared. You go with me. And she grabbed my arm and she dragged me up to the microphone. So I'm on a microphone with Timothy B. Schmidt from the Eagles and Margot Kidder. And we launched into Give Peace a Chance by John Lennon. So I got to sing in front of 100,000 people. That was obviously such an amazing experience for me. But what I loved about it is that all of these, highly regarded world-class musicians were using their voices for something very, very empowering and, for nuclear disarmament. And I loved that. And they were just human and they were just kind to me. And I loved that. And as I write in my book, being a feral child, I felt that music raised me. I really just had the radio and, a couple of albums when I could scrape some money together. And so music was my respite. And so I loved all of these people for raising me and for helping me to heal. And so that was kind of the first foray. But then later on, I was in grad school and I was working in a restaurant in Malibu called the Jetty. And, we served like barbecue and there was sawdust on the floor and people ate peanuts and threw them on the floor. And we were supposed to be singing waiters, but we mostly just sang happy birthday to people. And I was dressed in a white bowling shirt and like black Levi's and high tops. And I had this friend, Boyd Elder. Everybody should Google him because he was an amazing artist. He's now passed. But he, for instance, you would know the Eagles album cover of the skull. That was Boyd. So he was this famous artist and he was a friend of mine. And he would occasionally take me to meet friends of his. And that was, always fun. But one day he showed up at the restaurant and he said, hey, I want to take you to meet a friend of mine. And so I was like, okay, so we're driving up Pacific Coast Highway and then we start to pull into Malibu Colony. And I was like, wait a minute, Boyd, where are we going? Who are we going to meet? Oh my God, I don't think I have any makeup on. My hair is all sweaty and I've got barbecue sauce all over me. And he says, she doesn't care what you look like. And as we're walking up to the door, I'm like grabbing his arm, like, who is she? Who is she, Boyd? And he rings the bell. And here opens the door, Joni Mitchell. And again, I was just like, oh my God, are you kidding me?
The best of the best.
Just like my idol the iconic Joni Mitchell. And she, reached out her hand and shook my hand. And it was obvious that she and Boyd were good friends and hadn't seen each other for a while. And then they're rattling on about Bobby this and Bobby that. And I was like, what are they talking about? What are they talking about? Well, and then it became clear that they were talking about Bob Dylan. And so Boyd gets on the phone to talk to Bobby. And Joni gives me a tour of her house, of her artwork, of her amazing Native American artifact collection. And then she says to me, do you know anything about the I Ching? And at the time, this was a really popular, like Chinese divination, the I Ching coins and the book. And I knew a lot about it. It was a big deal. And I was like, actually, I do. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting on, Joni Mitchell's Persian carpet. We're sitting on the floor and we're reading to each other, the I Ching. And I had many other times that I hung out with Joni. I don't list them all in the book. I just wanted to illustrate that because she was so kind towards me. And this is the thing, when I met a lot of celebrities and particularly musicians, they were just so kind and loving towards me and reflected back to me that I was lovable, that I was special, and it really boosted my self-esteem. I thought to myself, well, if Joni Mitchell likes me, why doesn't why don't people in my family like me? Like, wait a minute. Joni Mitchell likes me, so, F-bomb them. She saw something in me that I didn't even know was there. And so she really healed me. And, the half dozen times that I actually spent with her was part of my healing as well. And I do also talk about the time that I got sober and walked into my first AA meeting in West LA. I had been arrested for a DUI and thrown in jail and had court ordered AA meetings and and I was in the music industry. So I found a list of music industry AA meetings, walked into my first AA meeting, and here comes this guy who looks very familiar to me. And he reaches out his hand to shake my hand and says, "Hello, I'm Richard." And I was just, I didn't say it, but I was just like in my head, oh my God, your name may be Richard, but it's also Ringo. And, and his lovely wife, Barbara Bach. And both of them have been sober for decades. So, I'm not outing anybody's sobriety here. But I sat there in my first AA meeting thinking, oh my God, if Ringo Starr can get sober, so can I. I mean, that gave me a lot of inspiration. And his kindness and the fact that Ringo Starr, would show up at AA meetings for his own sobriety in order to stay sober. He would come and be of service by greeting newcomers. So, yeah. So that is some of the fun, good stuff there.
Let's talk about the modalities. You did everything from sweat lodge to EMDR, which is my favorite, to talk to, sounds like you really got into all sorts, and it sounded like you already had a spiritual bent that was developing already, which I think allows you to open up that much more beyond what a traditional quote unquote therapy would be.
Somehow intuitively, again, like I said, my intuition or my strong sense of survival, First, when I was at Humboldt State in college, I did a 3-day Zen meditation retreat. And so meditation and the philosophies of Buddhism really spoke to me. And it was surprising for me. I didn't even know how to breathe. I had been holding my breath my whole life, that when it was time to do the breathing and meditation and in this meditation retreat, I kept holding my breath. I was shocked that I didn't even know how to breathe. And breathing, of course, is the number one way that we can regulate our central nervous systems and calm ourselves down. So that was my first foray, but also nature in Humboldt. It's so beautiful. A lot of my friends were from California, and they were big backpackers and hikers, and they introduced me to all of that. And being out in nature and in pristine places just helped me to calm down. So it was sort of like Buddhism and meditation and nature. And then when I moved to Los Angeles, and I got into the music industry. Then I got sober and started going to 12-step programs. And I also started psychotherapy, but I also started to practice Native American spirituality. And for many years, believe it or not, in Los Angeles, practiced Native American spirituality, which coincided with my getting sober. And so it really helped me to stay sober. And of course, once you're sober and you're not adding on these substances into your brain while you're also trying to heal, I mean, that is huge. I also started, was writing more. I was journaling. Later I took an acting intensive summer at American Conservatory Theater, and I started practicing yoga. So it really takes a village. It really is. I've used so many modalities and followed my bliss, as Joseph Campbell said, to heal myself. What felt good, what, built me up. And then eventually I would go back to therapy, and that's when I would do EMDR, which, by the World Health Organization deems EMDR one of the best modalities for complex PTSD and PTSD. It's a brain balancing technique, and that was tremendous for me. And then my therapist also used something called IMTT, and it's really another way of processing memories and gently. So it's just a gentle breathing and visualization practice for processing past trauma. So, which of course we still have the memories of what things happen, but we're not so easily triggered by that memory. And that's the whole point of using those modalities, as well as, I've used lots of somatic modalities such as yoga, movement, walking, hiking, dancing, singing, vocalizing, and meditation. So those somatic practices, as Bessel van der Kolk says in The Body Keeps Score, this trauma is not just an external event, it's an internal event. And besides talk therapy, which is wonderful, especially if they're using EMDR and IMTT, we need to use somatic therapies as well to process the trauma from our bodies.
I think about like the current political climate. As someone who was an abused child, I recognize abusers. And so it puts me back into fight or flight a lot. I find myself far more jumpy and more agitated these days. And I know exactly why.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because at the beginning of this conversation, how you said, I don't know why it is that I chose to transmute what happened to me and turn it into love toward the outside world. But there are those, I think abusers are people who were abused in some way or another, and they don't know how to transmute that pain. And so they inflict pain on others. And I think that's what we're seeing here. But it's that thing of like, oh God, I know who these people are because I was raised by one of these people. And
yes,
it's re-triggering, certainly.
It is re-triggering. And I do, obviously, this administration has triggered me a lot. The current person who is president reminds me a lot of my stepdad. And of course, my stepdad was a true believer of that movement. There's a lot of bullying and name calling and disparaging comments. And, so yes, it's very re-triggering. And I have had to take extra care of my central nervous system. I absolutely need to know what's going on in the world and I want to be educated about what's happening, but I do need to say, okay, that's enough of the news right now. It's time to go for a walk or a nice bath, or how about let's put on some music and dance around or go to a yoga class or, you know, get a hike up in the mountains. I think for a lot of people in our situation, we really, really need to take extra special care of our central nervous system. And I mean, even people who don't have any trauma from their childhood need to do the same because people are easily dysregulated. So,
Yeah,
yes, we need to be tender and compassionate towards ourselves and do take extra care.
absolutely. Let's talk about Hunter S. Thompson. When I saw that, I about lost my mind.
Okay, that's so fabulous because, there's some people I've talked to even on podcasts who are like, I don't know who that is. No, I'm like, what? Okay.
It really was a quick anecdotal thing. I have owned Fear and Loathing so many times in my life and lent it out and it vanishes. It's so hard to keep a copy of that.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, in all fairness to myself, I mean, it was 1993 and I had just moved from Los Angeles. I left LA to go be a DJ on KSPN FM in Aspen. And my boss said to me, because I had to start at the ungodly 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. hour, which was awful. And my boss said, you're going to get all kinds of crazy calls in the middle of the night. And especially from the gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson. And I was sort of like, wait, who is that? And then I remembered the Doonesbury
Yeah.
cartoon. He was in the Doonesbury cartoon. And then I remembered reading some articles of his in Rolling Stone magazine. So I was like, oh, right. But I didn't know, tons of details. So not long after I started on the radio, got a call at 4 in the morning. And Wendy Moore here on KSPN FM. Good morning. And here was, yeah, can you play me some Warren Zevon? Lawyers, Guns, and Money. And of course, I knew it was Hunter having another hit of, cocaine at 4 in the morning. Hi, Hunter. And I played him Warren Zevon, Lawyers, Guns, and Money for many more times as the months went on. So, and not long after that, so, okay, to live in Aspen, I was a DJ on the radio. I was a waitress in a restaurant. I worked for a music promoter running the box office. I had to have 10 jobs. So I was waitressing, and a few weeks after he had called in, here comes Hunter to my restaurant. So, of course, I went up to take his order for lunch, but then I said, hey, Hunter, not only am I your waitress today, but I'm, your KSPN DJ who plays Warren Zevon for you. And he was like, oh, yeah, you're a good DJ. I like what you play. And by the time his lunch was over, he said, hey, I need an assistant. Do you want a job? And I was like, okay, either he's coming on to me or this is legit. And, I was wanting to study more about being a writer. And I was like, well, heck yeah, I want to be your assistant. So, but by then I was sober. I had quit smoking. I did not like guns. I didn't know anything about politics, really. And I didn't care about sports. And so we were ill matched, although it wasn't a romantic relationship. But we were definitely ill matched, and that I also needed to go home and go to bed at a decent hour, whereas he liked to stay up all night. But there was something very, tender that I saw through sort of this crazy exterior of his, this, tough guy, kind of like drug addict, drug addled alcoholic, gun toting, swearing persona of his. I saw underneath all of that something very tender. And again, the point that I share that story is because Hunter was very kind towards me and generous, and he reflected something back to myself. Now he has a crazy legacy. I know he, you know, left destruction in his wake with his relationships and, his son and other people in the community. And I know, that
Complex.
he's a very complex person, but I can only speak to how he treated me, which was kind. And I worked with him until I met my husband in Aspen. He also called into the radio, and that's how we met. And when we decided to move to Chicago is when I stopped working for Hunter. And he knew that I was sober. He knew I didn't smoke. He did all those things in front of me, and in fact, he did it in front of everybody. He didn't give a rat's. We were at this posh restaurant in Snowmass. We were having lunch, and I'm picking away at my, expensive salad, and Hunter's sitting there right on the table, using his credit card to cut lines of cocaine and snort them. And he was drinking his cocktail. And I was so nervous. I was like, oh my God, Hunter, people are looking at you. These tourists were aghast. And he's like, oh yeah, I'll give them something to look at, and snorts another one. And then when we left and we're going down the windy mountain road back to Owl Farm where he lived, and he's reaching in the back of his, red Cadillac, the Shark, trying to get his bottle of whiskey out of the ice chest. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die with Hunter Thompson. And I had to crawl over the back seat and grab the whiskey bottle to give it to him so he could at least try to drive. And we did survive. So he knew that I didn't partake of any of those things. And the only thing that he offered was one time he said, yeah, you want to go blow something up, and like shoot his guns. And I was like, no, Hunter, no, thanks. I'm good. So it makes me sad. I always thought that I would see Hunter again. And so it makes me sad that he's no longer with us, but he was a bigger than life character.
Nothing more depraved than a man on ether.
Yes, no kidding. Wow.
All right, let's get into love.
Hey.
And it's again, hope core. It's nice to know that at a certain point, because I think you spell out pretty regularly that self-worth is a theme in your life, and to meet somebody who so enigmatic is the word that pops into my head.
Yeah, and what did you call Ignacio? He's a something unicorn.
Sparkly unicorn.
Sparkly unicorn. Okay. Aw.
That's how he seemed to appear off the page to me.
He's pretty magical.
I would like to speak to your internal monologue that is so used to things not working out, that what allowed you to not blow up or sabotage a good thing when it came to you finally?
Well, that's so interesting too, because right before I met Ignacio, I dated a guy that was an architect, and I dated another guy who was from South America. And, they bombed. But then I met him, and here he is, an architect from Colombia. And he was enigmatic. He was special. He was so much fun to be with. And he eventually, of course, had to learn all about my family. And he was so loving to me that he is like, well, there's a Spanish saying that when you marry someone, you marry their whole family. But as long as your family is well behaved, we'll let them stay in our family. And so he just had such a beautiful sense of himself, and kindness, and such an open and loving heart. And I really needed for someone that was transparent, who was not secretive, who what you see is what you get. And we've been married now for 30 years. So, and he is still that way. He is my best cheerleader. He's helping me so much on this whole book publishing journey. I had done so much work by that time that I really said to the universe, I've worked hard. I deserve to have a relationship. I deserve to have a companion. I really wanted a child. I just got really clear. As you said, when we're not well, we keep getting into these relationships that we think we can fix up. But the more work we do and the more clear we get, the faster we can see if this is going to work for us or not. And so, I mean, listen, honestly, when I first met him, he's 5 years younger than me. And so, as we were kind of getting serious about each other, and we were hiking all over the Aspen area. We were backpacking. We were having a blast. And when we started to talk about more serious subjects, when I would say, do you want to get married? And he was like, yeah, I would, yeah, maybe down the road. He was kind of waffling. Well, do you think you want to have a baby? Well, yeah, someday down the road. Well, by then I was, 37 years old. And I'm like, well, honey, my maybe have a baby days are already past. It's like, if you don't, we need to just end the relationship now. We shouldn't. I'm not going to try to convince you. And he quickly was like, oh, no, 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 it's okay. No, I want to have a baby. And then he got a job in Chicago at Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, a big architecture job, and asked me to move to Chicago with him. And I said, well, I've been around the block, more than a few times, and I'm not moving to Chicago to play house with anybody. And he's like, no, 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 I don't mean play house. I don't mean play house. It's you and me. And, so listen, it wasn't just 100%, I had to say, look, I don't mess around anymore. I'm 37 years old. I know what I want. Let's get clear. If we're on the same page, then great. But he had to process that. It was like, oh, okay, well.
When you really speak your truth, have real boundaries and say, it's okay. If you're not in it, that's okay.
Right.
People really respond to that in interesting ways. A lot of times they get mad. How dare you have boundaries? A lot of times they get confused. How are you able to speak your boundaries? A lot of times they're happy. I'm so delighted. It's really interesting. You learn a lot about a person when you express your boundaries.
And we just got clear. I mean, he just didn't know how to express that and what he really wanted. And so I did sort of hold him to the mat that he had to kind of express what he really wanted, because he was still just sort of, young and single and out there. But when we both got clear about what we wanted, then that was it. We moved to Chicago together. We got married on Valentine's Day, the following Valentine's Day at Cook County Courthouse. And we had our son, Mateo, in 1996. He was born just 2 months shy of my 40th birthday. And I couldn't be happier. That was with Ignacio and Mateo. I feel like I got a new lease on life, that a whole new beautiful chapter of my life that I had been working hard for so many years, for most of my life, was finally coming true. And, 30 years later.
You had a dream about Mateo's name?
Yes, I had this crazy dream that Ignacio and I went with a teenage son back to California. We had friends who lived on the beach, and I rang their doorbell, and they opened the door, and this couple also stood there with a teenage boy. And in my dream, I said, Matthew, meet Matthew. And that was my dream. It was so intense. It was one of those Jungian peak dreams. And when I woke up, I said to Ignacio, oh my gosh, I think we're having a boy. And in my dream, we named him Matthew. And Ignacio said, well, that would be Mateo in Spanish. And I said, that's it. That's his name. If it is a boy, his name is Mateo.
I love it. Your life is magical and wonderful. And I think, many tale is told of going through fire to get to the other side, to become awakened, the phoenix, if you will, which clearly you are. You are born again and again and again throughout your life, through all these different modalities and experiences, and people reflecting back to you your value and your worth.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes.
Such a lovely life, and so well
Thank you.
Articulated. Sorry, I get emotional.
I wish I could reach through the screen and give you a hug, because thank you. I'm glad that that it touched you, and that's kind of the message that you got, because that was certainly my intention, to speak honestly and truthfully and with vulnerability about my journey, and you got it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell everybody how they can find you. There's so much more we didn't cover. We could talk for hours, honestly.
We could, but read the book, My Pretty Baby.
Tell people how to find you.
You can find me on my website, which is www.wendyb, as in boy, Correa, CORREA.com, for my website. And then on Instagram, I am also Wendy B. Correa. And on Facebook, I am just Wendy Correa. So, yeah.
And I just want to say, on behalf of children everywhere, thank you for breaking the cycle with Mateo.
Yes, that's, to me, the greatest gift that you can give your children, is to be the cycle breaker yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for listening, everybody. And thank you, Wendy. This has been a great conversation.
It's been so wonderful. Thank you so much. And to the listeners, please read My Pretty Baby and reach out to me and let me know how it affected you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Let's be in touch.
See ya. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on all the platforms that have it. Thanks. Bye.